Well, I would like to call the meeting of the Lake Mills Park Board to order. It is July 8th. It is now 5:33. And we will do a call to order. Get a little bit of background as to process, and that tonight, if you are going to make a comment or speak, we'd ask that you come to the podium, sign your name and address, and make your comments. In a moment, we will do a roll call. We do have our secretary on a Zoom call, and we will do our roll call here in a moment. So, Mike, are you able to speak and say that you are here?
Yes, I'm present. I hope I don't show up on your video. I don't want to ruin your day.
Too late.
Oh, dang.
All right.
Okay, I'm present.
All right, thank you.
McCray Baker, present.
Tim Sprecher, present.
Mary Schmager, present. Mary Schmager, present.
All right, thank you very much. Guests and presenters, we're going to have, so I'm going to call you a guest, Eric, so could you just say who you are, please?
Eric Schreiner, Grounds and Facilities Director for the City of Lake Mills.
All right, thank you. We are going to go back to item number 2 on the agenda, and that Anita is now arriving. So we just did a roll call, Anita.
Okay.
So if you could.
Here.
So we just went, then we just, guests and presenters on item number 3. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to come to the podium and say who you are going to be? Please.
Colton Hutchinson, Water Resource, Jefferson County Land and Water.
Patricia Cicero, Director of Jefferson County Land and Water.
Thank you. So we are now on agenda number 4, the Parks Board minutes review and approval of regular meeting minutes of June 3rd, 2024. So there should be, I believe, 4 pages.
3.
Agenda items. So are there any changes, amendments to the Lake Mills Park Board minutes of June 3rd, 2024?
I didn't have any revisions.
All right, thank you. Anita?
No, I think they look good as printed.
Mary?
No edits to suggest.
Thank you. And Mike?
No, we had talked about perhaps having a discussion on the extent, purpose of the minutes, et cetera, but perhaps that's better held off till it's not on the agenda. Maybe that's better to have next month or when I'm present or after we have the new secretary.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Just as an aside, I think this was, we're tracking what the Lake Mills is used as sort of the standard format. So I think the more we refine that, it makes it easier to use. So thank you for your efforts, Mike. And do I have a motion to accept the minutes as written?
No motion.
All right.
Second.
Second, Mary. So McCray, motion, Mary, second. Do we have a vote? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Did I catch your aye, Mike?
I
All right, thank you. So they are accepted as written. So thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 5, Parks and Forestry Director's Report from Eric Schreiner.
I'll highlight on a couple things. First, we got through our busiest 2 weeks throughout the season. Town and Country Days followed by the 4th of July is substantially busy for staff. At this point, they're basically getting some nice dry days this week to at least get on top of things for grounds maintenance. Some of the things that I would like to address are specifically for the Ad hoc Committee on Urban Forestry. The committee did complete their drafted proposal for a tree protection policy. It was presented to the council on June 18th, and at this point, the council is going to be reviewing for potential adoption or discussion at a further council meeting. The pickleball courts were open and usable at this point, so we do have the nets installed. So far, very substantial positive reaction to the pickleball courts. There will be an opening celebration this week on July 10th. If anybody would like to attend that meeting, I can send you the actual time that they'll be holding it, but they're going to be having a picnic out there as far as some of the actual organizers and liaisons from the pickleball group, people that were absolutely beneficial for making the project happen. The next thing is I will be proposing for perimeter court fencing installation in following fiscal year, so I can see that being the next phase for development of the pickleball courts. For Town and Country Days, there is substantial amount of prep work from my staff. I'm happy to say that the broadcast speakers on Main Street were used for the first time since 2019. I'm not sure why there was this gap in time for them being used, but hopefully if you did attend the parade, hopefully you were able to hear fairly well on Main Street when they were broadcasting the floats coming up on Main Street. We will continue to be using those speakers for following parades. The next issue that I've been facing currently is the volleyball courts at Sandy Beach have been unusable for a fairly substantial amount of the season so far. They are holding water very substantially. They were not designed as volleyball courts initially. It was the hockey rink area that was in turn repurposed into temporary volleyball courts until the internal park developments happened at Sandy Beach. So they're actually not an ideal location for them. But what I'm trying to do at this point is find some way to divert some of the water out of the courts to at least make them usable for the time being. They just don't have adequate enough time to dry out when we get another rainfall. So trying to do what we can to at least make them playable. There have been several scheduled league games that have been canceled because the courts have been underwater. So trying to make those usable is a priority now that we have gotten through the 4th of July period. This time of year, myself and multiple other city staff members are deep into 2025 capital request processes for funding. You can see some of my potential CIP request. CIP stands for Capital Improvement Plan. So these are extraordinary budgetary expenses, basically development projects that are proposed for the next fiscal year. You can see some of the ones that are listed on my report here for potential ones that I'll be pursuing for the 2025 fiscal year. The public pier end replacement will be my highest priority in those for park improvement ones. The current piers that we have are absolutely in disrepair. They've exceeded their extended lifespan for the most part. And at this point, I will be selecting public pier end replacement as probably my highest priority infrastructure replacement. So not installing new infrastructure, but replacing old existing infrastructure will be the public pier ends. This is not an exhaustive list of CIP projects that I'll be submitting. I'll be continuing to work on these the next several weeks as we move forward. With that, I will touch base on it as we discuss restaurant developments, but both myself and multiple other city staff members have been heavily involved in the development process with the Thrive Architects for the restaurant at Sandy Beach. And lastly, so far, we're on track to beat our record for beach closures. Obviously, our goal is 0 beach closures throughout the year, but there are unpreventable circumstances that lead to beach closures, mostly E. coli positive test results. But this year we have had 1 beach closure at Bartles Beach. When looking back at previous years, there have been substantial more beach closures this time of year when we hit 4th of July. So hopefully we can keep on track and continue to have 0 beach closures for the rest of the beaches if we can. And other than that, are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
The public pier and replacements, where are those?
We have Ray and Hub Street, which is our northernmost one. The next one would be Fremont Street, and the last being College Street. Okay. I would include also the replacement of the swim pier at Sandy Beach on Sandy Beach East, which is the northernmost, I should say easternmost beach at Sandy Beach. But that one is about the same expected time or age as our other existing pier ends. That pier is used from July until the remainder of the season for swim lessons, but it is used pretty heavily by the public during the weekends for swimming. So when I propose to replace the 3 public pier ends, I will also be requesting the swim pier at Sandy Beach be replaced as well. This is absolutely separate from the boat launch piers and the boat lift piers themselves. So this is specifically for swimming access.
Go ahead, Mary.
I had actually one of my correspondence from a citizen ask about our knowledge regarding the water quality at the end of our 2 large city culverts. So this would be the one I'm visualizing, the one just north of Bartles Beach off of Lake, I think right there, that big new one, and there must be one down by Sandy Beach.
Yep.
And that there had been an article posted from must have been another city or 2 who had found that their city culvert water quality had a high, they actually could test the type of, I guess
Source?
the source of any kind of toxins or whatever coming out. And they had found raccoon in some cases, and that being a high source. And so I'm curious, have we ever looked at the drainage sources? I know a large number of our, what do you call them, drains, go to the lake directly. There are signs everywhere, some of them a little eroded, that we had talked about that in the past, but I know, so it's very challenging perhaps, but those big ones that come out, I'm sure, are a feeder of a lot of drains. And so I'm just curious if we've ever studied the water quality other than at the beach themselves.
From my
we learn from that?
understanding, no. Our current practices are just to test public beaches and public water points or access points, that being Tyranina, Bartles Beach, East Beach at Sandy Beach, and the West Beach at Sandy Beach. In regards to the stormwater drains, I wouldn't be able to speak out of them, and that would absolutely be a question for Randy Myram, the DPW director.
Okay.
I just don't have any oversight on the stormwater systems or drainage or anything like that, so I wouldn't be able to speak onto it. If they have been tested or if they are planned to be tested, I'm not quite sure. I will continue to do the same testing protocols for the beaches as we developed in 2022. So we developed a state standard for beach testing in 2022 and signing requirements associated with that. We'll continue doing that moving forward.
Thanks.
Yep. So in fact, the thing, I don't know if it's something to be proud of, but we are testing more and receiving less positive test results, which I thought it would actually go the other way around. So with more testing, I guess we just have good water quality this year so far, and fingers crossed that we continue to do that.
I had a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
First, I was just wondering, there's a huge number of geese that go waddling across from the mill pond onto Bartles Beach. And was there a city employee trying to scare them off before 4th of July? If so, that's great.
That would be me. I am the designated goose scare in the Parks Department, apparently. But without doubt, there is correlation between goose droppings on the beach and positive E. coli results. What we try to do is a non-harmful way of scaring these geese off the beach. If they are noticed on the beach when we're doing our morning cleanups, they are scared off with basically starter pistol noise-making devices for the most part, so it doesn't cause any harm to the geese, it just scares them away. But we are having police department do, it's called bird bombing is the actual term for it. So it's just like a loud noisemaker pistol for the most part. City police officers, like second shifters, if there are geese on the beach at night, they are doing the same as well. So it seems to be working, and like I said, we have had the least amount of positive E. coli test results at the beaches so far.
Well, that problem should diminish as they get mature and they start going off on their own. Second question I had, Eric, what is the first memorial tree? What was that?
First memorial tree was a private resident who, or not necessarily resident, but interested party who filled out a donation agreement. This donation agreement is similar to what you guys would review if there's like a donated bench or a donated infrastructure. I'm very much prompting people to not submit them for benches. We are at least in my opinion, very overpopulated with memorial benches in a lot of our parks. There's a substantial number of them. I do not feel comfortable removing existing memorial benches. I really would not pursue that. But if people are interested in applying for a memorial within a park, I'm heavily suggesting that they apply for a living memorial, is what I call it. Several municipalities have adopted a tree memorial policy, of which I kind of copied and tailored several municipalities to make ours, and it's an addition to our existing donation policy. This is just the first one that has officially been applied for and now installed. That is at Lower Tyranina Park. I don't recall the species off the top of my head, but a silver maple, or at least a dying silver maple, was removed in Lower Tyranina Park last removal season, and it has since been replaced with this memorial tree. These memorial trees, there is involvement from the actual donator to provide a few recommended species that they would like to see, but it ultimately comes down to staff involvement and authority for the selection of them. And then there is going to be a recognition plaque installed at this tree as well. So this is the first of, I hope, of very many memorial trees.
That's great. Very, very cool. And then finally, I would kudos to you. We had visiting family, and they went up and used the racquetball or the paddle ball courts, pickleball courts, and we're quite impressed.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I do have a question, Eric, on the public pier replacement with the floating piers. Will they have the same, for a better term, footprint?
Yeah. So they have to, based on where they attach to the interface on the shoreline. So that interface is basically the linkage point where the stairs go into the actual pier itself. I'm looking to have the same length, the same amount of usability. So these ones are approximately anywhere. We have a couple different designs or layouts of them, but some are T-shaped, some are L-shaped that come out, and they're approximately 35 feet from shore. I wouldn't want to decrease that because there are people who fish from those. I'd like them to be as long as the existing ones just so they can cast into further water. Now the floating piers, and why I would like to do that is staff do have to carry each individual panel down there, and they do have to be transported in the off season. We can't leave them within the right of way. It's just fairly labor intensive, and when you do have fluctuating water levels, those leg piers have to be adjusted. This year we found we're at the maximum point of adjustment on those piers, and we had some issues to where they were coming out of the channels with waves and everything. I think floating piers are probably the most cost benefit of piers. It's least amount of staff involvement. They seem fairly maintenance free. Plus they could be installed via a installation barge or a crane barge when the boat lift piers are installed too. So in fact, it actually substantially decreases the amount of staff time for putting them in. So I think it's our best option to propose floating piers for them.
Well, and I used the one kind of on the north end, and if you get a little overweight and a couple people on there, they get a little shaky. So
Yes.
I think this will be a nice improvement.
And they're not sandy bottoms where these are installed either. They're very rocky bottoms. They've filled their role, and their time to be replaced, I think, is now.
Yeah, so thank you. Any other questions for Eric regarding the director's report?
I will say, I think there was one comment, at least from Colton as well, specifically for, I don't know if I actually selected it in my director's report, but I did have a couple people reach out for volunteer efforts for yellow iris removal along the shorelines of the mill pond. Looking to collaborate with volunteers as well. Hopefully we can provide some staff assistance for that, for the removal of yellow iris. This is separate from proposed options on the mill pond itself. This is specifically removing yellow iris on the shorelines of the mill pond.
How, just as a round curiosity, where do you place things like that? Do they go to a
Good question.
incinerator or?
So there are a couple predetermined proper disposal methods for these. Basically, the goal here is to limit as much as possible no propagation or repropagation of these invasive species. What we do is we do have a dump location for refuse material for the city. So whether that be leaf debris, brush pickup debris, streets material debris. What we do with specifically invasives is, for one, we do not mix them with other vegetation. If we're removing invasives, it is invasives specifically, so we have a separate dump location for them. And what we do when we remove these invasives, so it could be anything from garlic mustard to buckthorn to whatever, is we dump them in the actual concrete and asphalt refuse areas, and they get buried by substantial amounts of concrete and asphalt. So I've never seen any repropagation of any invasives using this method in the last 3 years, so we'll continue to do that.
I just wondered, I didn't want somebody to go and think, oh, these are pretty, and go grab them from one of our, refuse places.
They are very pretty, but they
Take
are
them
horribly
somewhere.
invasive.
Okay, all right, thank you.
May I ask one more question?
Yes, Mary, you may.
Regarding the pickleball courts, I'm curious, I know you had mentioned you're talking about the fence perimeter. Any thought regarding additional care signage? I happen to notice there are some firework marks and some tire marks, like
Yep.
they're being utilized for other recreation, and I'm just curious. And I don't know if signs are meaningful, if they've changed behaviors or not, but I'm just curious on
That's
any
mixed.
thoughts?
If fencing is installed, I think someone has to, they have to be very motivated to cross that fencing, so it's a physical barrier to do something else. However, I have just received, as of today, signage specifically for the pickleball courts. That signage, if I remember correctly, says athletic courts, or I'd have to recall, but it said no inline skating, no biking, no
Perfect.
everything. So it says specifically for designated athletic court use. If you would like the specific language, I assume by the end of the week they'll be installed and you can check it out, but it
I
is
didn't
for
look-
that intent.
Yeah, I wasn't looking for any language specifically, but someone had shared that there were marks, and so I happened to
Tire
be on the
marks.
courts today, and I saw them myself. I didn't see the bike marks were not as bad as what I was envisioning based on the comment that was provided to me, but I did see some firework
Yep.
marks, which I thought were
So signage will
unfortunate.
be installed, like I said, most likely by the end of this week. So
Awesome.
just received
Thank
today.
you.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions regarding the Parks Recreation Director's Report? Hearing none, let's move to agenda item number 6, public comments, including emails. Anyone have a email or a comment they've gotten? I know, Mary, you gave us one about the, sounds like pickleball court having a fireworks.
Yes, I have one email, and I emailed it to the city council, and I should email it to all of you because it's very lengthy. It is in regards to Sandy Beach. And it is from a citizen with a large number of questions and comments in all facets of things going on in Sandy Beach. And so I will forward this to all of you so you have it as a record.
Speaking of that as a record, when that's forwarded to us, does that get into the minutes some way so that if the public wants to see that email, they can see it?
Regarding the email itself, I'm not quite sure. We may be able to note that a person or a resident submitted the questions in regards to this certain topic. Now, if the actual email itself is posted, that I'm not quite sure, but the least I can do is check with Madison. I think that might be a confidentiality breach if that person's private information is put out there, but at least the content would be visible within the minutes, I think. So I can verify with you, but it should be within the meeting minutes as well.
I would think that if it went to that trouble, that I think we should have some sort of verbal or written record of what their comments are.
Well, it does go to Misty Quest, so it is noted if it comes in through an email that comes into our, like a city email address. This is considered a public record, so I know it goes into a storage place. So if somebody were to say, do you have all of the emails or correspondences on a particular topic? Misty would have this in the mix with all of the other ones, but it's not that it would, I don't believe emails are posted out as a link in any agendas, if that's what you're asking.
Mary's correct. That was correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I just
far-
want to make sure that the content is.
So far, how I've been approaching these for us is I've referred to them and just summarize what was said and then the response to them if it was long. I didn't realize that Misty was keeping the actual email.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I did have a comment from someone, this goes to the facilities specifically at Bartles Beach, but they were very impressed by the cleanliness of the park and the restrooms. And they commented that was very busy and they were very impressed that it was still clean even.
Can I
at the
ask
end
if
of
that
the
was
day.
on a weekend?
It would have been, I think, beginning Friday, so it'd been that, kind of holiday time. They were impressed.
What I will do at that point is I'll let the specific staff members know who are on duty this weekend and let them know. Thank you.
And we also did receive, after the last meeting, the PowerPoint presentation on Sandy Beach recommendations that Susan Trier with Rock Lake Improvement Association had showed us. I think we all received that, right? Yeah, so that probably should be noted, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other public comments or such? Here comes Colton again. Repeat your name, Colton, and the topic of your,
Colton Hutchinson. We just had some, looking at the dredging, Parks Board to City Council kind of thing, and just some recommendations or clarifications going into, there wasn't too much on the first 2 pages. It was pretty much just option 4 and option 5. It looked like 4th bullet down on option 4 for the pros. It talks about potential removal of invasive vegetation. I would just say that the dredging probably wouldn't remove any shoreline vegetation. You would be removing obviously the stuff in the water and stuff, but not actually on the shoreline. So, and it also, I guess, depends on where they do the dredging and what they determine the high water mark, but just a note on that. And then there was the actual widths of the channels, obviously the channel from like the boat launch to the ferry, to the bridge was good. That's like 50 feet wide and 4 feet deep. I would just probably try and recommend that in there, like what the width of it is and stuff. And then for the shoreline, it does say 3 feet, but it doesn't talk about like how wide it is. And I would just recommend looking at some of the maps that Eric had put together to kind of have whatever that channel is. Don't have the dredging go all the way to the shoreline. Kind of have that dredging end kind of at the end of the boat launches, and then go 20, 25, 30 feet kind of out to the opening of the mill pond. That way you're just not disturbing a lot of that native shoreline kind of vegetation. And if you take out a lot of that, you're likely going to get a lot more invasives just taking over that area right away, because the invasives just like those areas of disturbance, and they take over that a lot quicker than sometimes the natives can. And I think it was noted to be 50 feet wide for the shoreline stuff. And like I said, just I would bump it back to like 25, 30. I don't really think that 50 feet is really necessary. Even if you have 2 pontoons go another way, you still have plenty of clearance with 30 feet wide typically. And then you're just preserving a lot more native plants and stuff if you do that a little bit less width and stuff. So that was a lot of what I had kind of for recommendations. I don't know if Patricia has anything else. So, thanks.
and Colton, that was option 4 you were speaking
and
to.
5.
Yeah,
correct?
option 4 and 5 is kind of the same reference.
Okay.
I mean, I saw that option 5 was pretty much just the public areas, and I'm assuming that's kind of for fishing accessibility, but I would just say, even if you are dredging that, because you have to do that tapering as well anyways, you're gonna still have a lot more plants growing back regardless. So
Okay.
I don't really see that it's not, just because you dredge it, it's not gonna stay open necessarily. You're definitely gonna have plants kind of encroaching back. I mean, the first year it might be open, but as the plants reestablish themselves, they're gonna kind of take over a little bit, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Patricia Cicero. I'm just going to add on a little bit to what Colton was talking about. So the mill pond is such that there are Eurasian water milfoil, which is one of the invasives, that's in the mill pond. And so when you dredge, that milfoil will just gravitate to that disturbed area, and so that will be growing there. You know, Colton this year is, yep. Wait until the sirens, okay. It's 6 o'clock, I think. Go ahead. All right. So this year, Colton is planning a survey of all the aquatic plants in the lake. It's a point intercept survey, it's called, where there's a distinct grid of points that he'll visit and report out on what species he finds. And so he can provide a map where some of the invasives are later on after he does that survey. So that might be a good thing for you to look at, because he'll also be noting all the natives. And when I look at Rock Lake, not necessarily the mill pond, but we definitely have some invasives in Rock Lake. And one of the reasons why invasives, I'm sorry, haven't taken over the entire lake is because the native plants are really important to a healthy ecosystem, and some of them can help prevent the establishment of invasives. So just something to be aware of with dredging. You're going to get Eurasian water milfoil, which can grow to the surface of the water and keep on growing, definitely in the mill pond with the depths that it is. Even if you're dredging down 4 more feet, you're going to have Eurasian water milfoil coming to the surface and still on growing. Let's see, there was a couple other things. I agree, Colt and I talked about this today, that, we don't like to see the dredging right next to the shoreline. It would be good to have it, if you're going to have that circle, it would be good to have it out from the shoreline. There's a number of reasons for that. One is the invasives that we've talked about, but that near shore area is vital to a lot of native species that rely both on near shore land and near shore water areas. So that's a really important part of the ecosystem. So if you're dredging right by shore, that's going to basically take out a lot of habitat for those species. Also in option 5, you talk about, I think it's the 4th bullet, dredging from the high water mark would potentially remove invasive vegetation. Oh wait, no, that wasn't where. Oh, cons of 5, the first bullet point, could require additional costs associated with establishing native vegetation through a lesser extent than option 4. Just so if you're talking about aquatic natives, except for near shore emergent aquatic plants, we're not aware of any successful native aquatic plant reestablishment. So if you're dredging an area, don't expect to be able to go into that dredge area and plant some native beneficial aquatic plants. We just don't have any examples of that being a success. Various people have tried it, but so far what Colton and I are aware of, it's basically those emergent plants that are in the water but come out of the water, that are near shore, like bulrushes, things like that. Those things have a better likelihood of surviving if you're going to be planting. So just wanted to give you that additional information.
Can I ask a question, as long as we have both those experts here? I don't recall why we went with the 50-foot width, but I just want to be clear. So Patricia and Colton, are you both suggesting that 30-foot wide channels, whether it's from the fire department out to Ferry Drive or the one that would go all the way around the mill pond, are you suggesting that would be at least as adequate as a 50-foot one?
So when Colton was talking about a reduced width, we were talking about if you provide that circle. And really, I mean, the mill pond is small enough that you can even make a circle one way. So we were thinking, okay, what's the maximum width of a pontoon boat, even though at this point a pontoon boat can't get under the bridge. But, you know, what are they, like 8 feet? Maybe a really big pontoon boat is 10 feet wide. So you really, even if you had that channel be one way, then really you don't need anything more than 15 feet wide. And in my opinion, the least disturbance, the better, because of the sensitive nature of that area. And in fact, I'm thinking that if you explain that reasoning to the DNR, who's going to have to review any dredging permit application, and you say that we know this is a sensitive area, we want to do as least disturbance, and so that's why we're making this circle only a certain distance wide. If you reduce that, that would be better. I understand why perhaps you would want the channel from the boat launch out to the lake wider, just because that's more of a thoroughfare for anybody accessing the lake with their boat from that launch. I'm not sure if 50 feet is needed. Again, that maybe could be lower. So I guess that we hadn't talked about that and come up with a recommendation, but again, the least disturbance, the better in my mind.
One point on that is, my colleagues can correct me, but I think we were also looking at this dredged area as not simply a conduit for traffic, but also a place for fishermen to anchor and fish. Isn't that right?
I would guess that with a great resource of Rock Lake with really great fishing spots in it, that you probably aren't going to have a lot of fishermen in boats going to the mill pond to fish. That's what I think. I know that there is that kid fishing event that the Optimist Clubs puts on every year. I know it's nice to be downtown. It's nice to be by the fire station, but it would be nice if that event maybe could find a better location also, because just the nature of that resource of the mill pond, you're not going to really get a lot of great fish in terms of sport fish there. It's more of a refuge for near shore native species that are, you know, really small species, but very critical to the habitat of the lake environment.
Tim, I have a question. This is on our agenda later. So this subject, and so are we opening up a conversation? Because I have a few questions, and I don't know if Patricia and Colton are staying for that part of the agenda, or are we okay to ask questions at this point in time?
I think for continuity, I would like to keep it where it is on the agenda.
Okay.
So then it goes to, can you stay for questions?
Yes.
On the agenda item, which is number what, Mary, do you have it right there?
It's at the end, which is why I was asking. It is number D, 8D.
8D, all right, so
Yes.
in the new business. If we could do that, I think just for continuity, that would be fine.
Sure.
Because I do have some questions also, so thank you, Mary.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that. Let's move on to our next agenda item, number 7, which is vice chairman and secretary nominations and elections. So A is nomination and election of the vice chairperson, and the present vice chairperson is McCray, and If there's anyone else that would like to, want to first ask McCray, are you willing to serve if nominated and elected?
Yes.
All right. Are there any other nominations for the vice chair? All right. Hearing none, I would like to have a motion to elect McCray as the vice chair.
I'll make that motion.
All right. And a second?
Second.
All right. So the motion to have McCray continue on as vice chair of the Parks Board has been
Thank you.
motioned and seconded. Do we have a vote? Mary?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mike?
Aye.
McCray, I think you can aye yourself.
Thank
there.
you. Thanks,
Aye.
McCray, for taking that on.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then moving to number 7, Vice Chair, Secretary nomination elections for nomination and election of secretary. Mike, are you willing to continue your role as secretary for the Parks Board?
If you'll tolerate me, yes.
All right. Is there any, I'm going to put it out again, is there any other nomination for secretary? Hearing none, do I have a motion to put forth Mike as secretary of the Parks Board?
I so motion.
All right, and do I have a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a motion to accept Mike as a secretary. We have a second to that. Do we have an election, a vote? Mary?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
I vote yes.
Aye.
And Mike?
Aye.
All right, thank you. So we have
Thanks,
elected, McCray as vice chair continuing and Mike as secretary to continue into the next term. So thank you both for your service and we look forward to working with you again. So moving on, give a little clap for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Little celebration. All right, moving to number 8, which is new business. And I'll read out the bullet points in there so then we can go back on it. So examine the process for sending a Parks Board thank you. B, the discussion of the Sandy Beach restaurant details, which we have documented in front of us. A discussion, decision on attendance, absence, notification process. D is discussion recommendations on next steps regarding the fulfilling the city council regarding the mill pond. And then the options we've talked about. And then we also have E, discussion on holding August Parks Board meeting on Monday, August 26th. So let's go to examining, back to 8A, examine the process for sending a Parks Board thank you. I'll speak to this very quickly. We had Mr. Unz come and present, and what we want to do is say thank you, but it's not really an official thing that we're going to do. That's something that's still in the works. So the process is basically thanking him for attending and making the comments, but not really a formal thank you coming from the Parks Board. That should come through the city or the city council is what I was given. So I just wanted to make sure we had know that it was heard and thanked, but it won't be an official one from us. Okay. Any other comments regarding that? All right, if not, let's go to B, which may be lengthy, discussion on Sandy Beach restaurant details. And are you going to lead this, Eric? All right.
Yep, I can take it off from here if you'd like. So in front of all of you and Mike for attending online, there is, if you could reference the June 18th City Council meeting, on there is an attachment for the initial concept designs for the restaurant construction at Sandy Beach. Thrive Architects did their initial presentation of this design to City Council on that 18th meeting of June. We've had continued meetings with Thrive based on both city staff input as well as City Council input. So the copy of these concept designs that you have in front of you are being altered basically as we speak at this point. The request from City Council at that June 18th meeting was to find some potential cost savings measures. I can go into a couple of those. We are hoping to basically delineate them via line item items, so kind of like menu items or additional add-ons to this concept designs, And it would be up to city council at further discussion to pick and choose what meets the budget requirements, what meets the public requirements of the actual restaurant facility itself. So what I can do is I will go through the initial design, the design that will be proposed at following meetings. The design that will be proposed at following city council meetings will be very, very similar to the one that we have here. This is our base design, and there are very small features that are being adjusted for. They really are not substantial design changes. They're morely cost-saving design changes. So hopefully this does present a decent picture for you for the initial concept design. I'll start off, the first thing is you'll notice the actual setback of this restaurant facility is very, very similar to the footprint of the existing herring sandbar. You will see a dotted line if you're on page 1 of this site plan document. You'll see a dotted line underneath the proposed restaurant, and that was the existing herring sandbar. You'll see it's actually written there on a small little word box on that first page. So the orientation was specifically designed to be parallel as much as possible to the shoreline itself to maximize beachfront views or shoreline views. But the footprint of it is approximately 135 feet of the actual building itself from the shoreline. With the installation of a potential deck, it would be approximately 125 feet. I know the request from Rock Lake Improvement was to be approximately around 130 feet from the actual shoreline. So I would think that we are within that realm. We are not yet at the point of landscape design. So I know some of the other priorities that were discussed were stormwater management, prioritization of pervious surfaces rather than impervious surfaces. I will say that has been stated as a priority of city staff to Thrive Architects. Initially, the patio area was proposed to be poured and stamped concrete. We much preferred an installation of a deck, which would be pervious to allow water, I suppose, water infiltration at that point. So we have made it a priority, but I have not yet seen landscape design requirements. We have some initial landscaped areas around the actual building perimeter itself, but I assume there will be, it's not yet complete as far as those landscaped areas. So as we move forward to the initial layout, the following pages are interior layouts. Page 2 is potential first floor layout of this restaurant. You'll see kind of this shaded perimeter line is the actual exterior proposed walls, whereas the tables and the decking area on the outside is to be outdoor seating areas. So in this concept, there is both an upper and lower level, both inside and outdoor for this building. The priorities that we looked at based on the survey results from last year and that Thrive Architects took into consideration was without doubt the largest priority is outdoor seating and views of the lake. We want this to be accessible to beachgoers, and we want it to be a portion of the beach and to be fairly inclusive to the beach itself and not be too intrusive to the beach. So here, the whole concept or vibe of this building is to bring the inside to the outside within the building. So both second story and first story have 4 very large glass garage door type elements. Those can be raised with nice weather, closed for poor weather, etc. But all 4 of those are proposed to be opening up both on the second and first story, and also just to allow kind of a seamless entrance with indoor and outdoor diners. One of the other things was the importance of a outside vending window. In some of these concept drawings, you can see that vending window attached to the bar. This would allow customers to both place orders from the outside of the restaurant and then eat on the beach. So you can order from the restaurant, but you don't necessarily have to eat at the restaurant. So we were trying to retain that feature from the sandbar, as the concession window was a pretty important part of the sandbar itself. And outdoor seating was absolutely made a priority that we relayed to Thrive Architects. So having a deck for entertainment areas, for live music, etc., entertainment, potential fire pit installations, and maximizing outdoor seating as much as possible. That includes both an indoor and outdoor bar at this point right now. Initially in this concept, it is proposed to have an elevator to the second story mezzanine area. This mezzanine area on page 3 is kind of like a catwalk dining style setup. So you have an additional area over the bar, which would be overflow dining area, as well as potential reservable space. And then the second floor dining is kind of a walkway to the outdoor deck as well. This includes both a staircase and a potential elevator installation, but does allow dining on that mezzanine area and access to the second story deck. There is an interior staircase as well as an exterior staircase over the bar, so you can access the decking area both from inside and outside the restaurant. Now, I will say this is the best case scenario. Every bell and whistle that is currently drafted for the design. The architects designed this as much as possible to stay within budget, but as concept design within this drawing iteration, it is over the allotted budget amount. So like I said, City Council has requested some cost-saving measures to be pursued. There, like I said, if you looked at the comparison drawings between some cost-saving design elements versus this one and the next, they would be negligible at best. They still provide the same amount of seating, of building access, et cetera. They're purely architectural design changes, potentially cheaper materials, et cetera. Now, some of the things that will be listed as line items that City Council will be able to pick and choose from would be the elevator installation is a very sizable expense at approximately $250,000 to $300,000. So that will be listed as a pick and choose option, as well as the installation of the expanded second floor area. This area is on page 3. This square seating area above the bar would also be a pick and choose option. And the potential limiting of second story outdoor dining area. This would be kind of the decreasing in size of that above the concession area near the exterior staircase. So that would be a pick and choose option as well for City Council. So these will be pursued. I'm not sure if they will be at the next City Council meeting. I am anticipating they will be, just based on timing wise. We are expecting, if possible, that this goes to bid at the end of this month based on City Council decisions. Again, this will not be approved or be able to move forward until there is a referendum in November of this year. So if City Council does approve the concept design based on their input, it still does have to go to referendum in November to be able to have the funds to build. So like I said, expected time frame would be potential final concept design at the end of this month in preparation for bid with potential referendum in November. I know that was a lot. Like I said, when we do have the final cost-saving measure concept completed, so as of now, this is not the most updated concept, but it's the most updated published concept that will become available as soon as possible. Like I said, most likely the next City Council meeting. But there will be very minimal noticeable differences between that version and this one as far as actual layout and design. So with that, I would love to answer any questions, and I'll try my best to answer.
I do have a question, Eric, and if you don't know it, I'd like to maybe get it by the next meeting, but what was the capacity of the sandbar? Both internal and when the deck was used?
I don't know the numbers off of my head. I would have to look back because I believe that was discussed at prior ones. I can say that the expected capacity or occupancy of this building is higher than the existing sandbar, but to what amount, I'm not quite sure.
Okay, but we do know it's going to be more.
Square footage of the building, not much more, but layout-wise, it's expected to have higher occupancy.
Okay, all right.
Especially in outdoor seating. With the installation of expanded outdoor seating, especially with that second story, there's absolutely substantially more outdoor seating available at this proposal.
And then the second part of that capacity, and I'm going to think that the architects have considered this, with the redesign of the Sandy Beach boat launch, I think you've lost quite a bit of parking space. So you're increasing the capacity, but not increasing the parking space. And I just wonder what the plan is to mitigate conflicts and such.
At this phase, it's specifically by design. The parking lot infrastructure updates are not a portion of this restaurant build, but will be in the next following stage of development. So that will be addressed. The parking lot outlay, or how it actually works with this restaurant, will be addressed at that point. And the parking lot design will take the restaurant into account as far as like handicap access, potential drop-off areas, lighted parking for access to the restaurant. The primary access is going to be from the parking lot, with the secondary access being from the beach. So at this stage, no. It's at least being discussed what changes we need to make to the parking lot, but it will be following construction of the restaurant.
I have in my notes from the city council meeting, the occupancy is 100 in the base plan of the new restaurant. That does not include exterior or the expanded loft. But I do not have a record of what the Sandy Sandbar was.
Yeah.
But I think this is larger, if I recall correctly.
I'm not quite sure
Larger by
either
count of people.
what the actual true occupancy or allowed occupancy was of the sandbar. I couldn't tell you. The outline of this building, or basically the general design of it, I would say it allows for higher occupancy for sure, without a doubt.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a question. If I'm looking at this correctly, are the roofs basically flat?
No, they are sloped.
Okay. Because I see here somewhere,
The roofs are sloped.
Flat.
I believe the only non-sloped area was above the kitchen. And the reason for that is, I'm not a restaurateur by any means at all, but that would be for like their exhaust systems and installation of all the stuff for their kitchen that they need. They need that to be mounted on a flat surface. So above the kitchen itself, I believe, is flat, while the rest of it is actually, it's a banked roof.
Yeah, this is flat.
okay, because one of the things that was recommended is to make sure to capture roof runoff. And so I was wondering if this design, this preliminary design, would be conducive to that.
I would think so. If the roof is slanted, I would assume there's ways to either reroute, capture rainwater, et cetera. Like I said, I think that would be included when landscape design happens. We're not quite at that point, but it is not a flat roof entirely. No.
Okay, okay.
On the diagram labeled A11, it has flat roof below. So I believe, I don't know exactly,
That's the kitchen.
so that's the
In the
kitchen.
Yep,
bathrooms, yeah.
yep. So that's the kitchen and restroom area. That was the flat roof. Like I said, initially when this process started, there were 4 substantially different designs proposed, rough draft designs from Thrive. We took the survey results into consideration, so city staff took the survey results into consideration as well as Thrive. We picked an initial layout that was kind of the best of both worlds, the most overall that we preferred. And from that point, we picked and choose design elements from the other 3 and included into this, so it's a culmination. But this one was the preferred box layout, I would like to say. It provides the most open layout, and the most outdoor seating availability is what this option provided. Thrive has been fantastic to work with, taking our recommendations as well as public recommendations and city council input, and have been very receptive to design changes. So I think, I suppose, I don't know necessarily what I was expecting when this process initially started. It's kind of hard to have preconceived notions or thoughts as far as what this would truly look like. But when you look back at the survey results, I pretty firmly believe that this addresses the majority of the priorities that the public voiced their opinion on. They really wanted an inclusive thing. They wanted something that was non-intrusive to the park. They wanted to maximize outdoor seating. And I'm pretty confident that this would address all those, or at least it does.
Any other discussion regarding the Sandy Beach restaurant details?
If I could, I'll provide a little bit more input that I've specifically listed to the architects. So the stuff that I've listed before has been general inputs from city staff. The specific inputs from myself have been ones regarding, permeable surfaces, sustainable building materials, eco-friendly building materials, but as well as composite building materials, so things that are as maintenance-free as possible, trying to get the most bang for our buck. So one of the other options is the potential proposal for a steel roof, which is just more maintenance-free than the other ones. However, it is more expensive. And the decking on the exterior of the building, we did require it to be a deck rather than a patio. I think there's something about sitting on a deck on a beach that would be preferred, but composite decking just for ease of maintenance as well, longevity, and then the actual siding on the building itself will be similar to like a cedar siding composite, just so it's it looks nice, but it also provides the most sustainable building material in my opinion, just maintenance wise. So that's some of the specific input that I've listed to the architects.
One specific input that I would request is to ask that the glass be made to the standards of the Audubon Society, that it's sort of bird resistant.
Yes, sorry.
So that, I'm gonna guess the glass, and especially with 2 stories, I think we should make sure that we have, and I think that's similar to what they have in the city of Madison. The glass is designed so that the birds can see it and minimizes them hitting it,
I'll relay.
so.
I agree. I think that's a good point.
Otherwise, if I may ask, like I said, I don't know exactly what I was expecting when we were first shown these designs. Do you generally like it? What are your thoughts? Like I said, it is at the city council stage of approval, but I would very genuinely curious as far as what your guys' input are.
Me too. Since this will be coming back to us,
Yeah.
right? I'd love to hear.
And
your
we've
thoughts.
worked a lot on this. Like I said, I'm and mostly Thrive, but this has been a very labor-intensive project, and I'm just very curious to see what your thoughts are.
So I am relatively new to the city of Lake Mills. I've lived here 4 years, so I believe the sandbar closed about the time that I got here. So it's, I guess, a little bit unique. So I guess maybe some questions. Is the city paying for this building and then a private company is just moving in at zero cost?
No, there's going to be a lease structure for repayment. The extent of that is still going to be decided in a lease structure. There will be portions that are both paid in a payback cycle or lease requirements from the restaurateur themselves, but that's still being developed in the lease, I suppose, lease layout, lease structure. But there will be sizable portion of this paid for by city.
Okay.
Yes.
And then another question, was the sandbar a single-story building?
Single-story
Yes.
building.
Okay. And has there been any public comment about having a much taller 2-story building at the beach?
Yep, there has been, and this goes back quite a bit during the survey results as well. People want increased occupancy, but not to exceed a certain footprint, which I think is valid. We want to minimize the actual footprint that this building has on the beach itself. To not be too intrusive to the beach. In order to do that, a second story is somewhat necessary. I think it normally came down to the occupancy requirements as well. We expected to have approximately, or at least 100 indoor occupants. In order to do that, again, a 2-story building would be required based on this footprint. So the actual footprint of square footage of this building was approximately 500 to 1,000 square feet larger than the sandbar, and we wanted to limit that on the smaller side as much as possible. And that was based on public input as well as city staff input. So I think we've done quite a bit of our due diligence, taking public comment to both provide a building that's accessible to people, to the occupancy that people expect, as well as minimizing the footprint on the beach. So I think we've done that with the 2 stories, but public have been involved in the input process.
Okay. With that said, I do think the building, it's an attractive building, at least as what the diagrams show here. So, yeah, looks cool.
I do have a question. Earlier you mentioned, and I couldn't quite hear, you said something about the elevator would be, could you just repeat your comment about
Yep.
the elevator as a potential cost reduction. Yeah.
So the elevator is not required for ADA requirements in this building because all of the general amenities for this building are on the first story. So due to ADA requirements, the bar, the restrooms, indoor and outdoor seating are all accessible on the first story, so we're not required to have ADA access via an elevator. However, we wanted to list it as an option for city council to pick and choose from. The expected cost is anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000 for elevator install, which is sizable. However, the layout of where this elevator is in the building was specifically chosen for this location due to if it was omitted, it would not cause substantial design changes to the building.
Thank you.
I just have a question, and maybe this is something that the city council, as far as the feasibility studies, and the square footage of this, was this also given input from restaurateurs as to say, we need to have X amount of this in order to make this profitable?
Yep, so in these meetings, the restaurateurs, which is Garver Events LLC, they were actually selected before the architect firm was at city council. So we've had these restaurateurs, I believe, decided from city council in approximately October of last year, I think, if I recall correctly. They have been involved at every single city staff meeting with the architects up to this point. So actually, in fact, a lot of our design aspects were delegated to Garver. There's just some questions that are asked as far as a restaurateur that city staff were just not knowledgeable in the restaurant running business. How much bar space is required, how much square footage of kitchen space is required, what's the proper layout for some of these kitchen amenities. Those are questions we really can't answer, or at least I don't feel comfortable answering them. So a lot of those were deferred to Garver, and they've been fantastic to work with through the design process. So they have had just as much input as city staff has had in the design of this building.
The other thing about this is that the parking is going to be precious, and with a lot of restaurant with a lot of staff, I just hope that they're considering where the staff is going to park and then be able to get to their work without taking up space for people that are attending the restaurant.
Yes, and these are questions that have been discussed briefly, but I don't think we're quite at the point to answer them. In fact, we need to figure out, are we taking this building to bid? Is it going to be approved budgetary-wise? We're not quite sure yet. I think the majority of those questions will be answered once we next pursue parking lot updates, but at least they've been discussed, like where is the dumpster layout going to be, et cetera. That's all stuff we're aware of. We're just not at the point to decide yet.
I had a couple more questions. So this building's going to be at Sandy Beach. Will the maintenance of this building will that fall under the Parks and Forestry Department, or will that be handled by other means? And if so, has there been discussions about the budgeting for the Parks Department?
Fantastic question, because that was probably my biggest involvement in this process too. So the lease has not yet been developed. However, the department that I have currently, my stance is that I don't have the capability to withdraw current park staff resources in favor of supporting a building like this. I think it is phenomenal for the beach. However, within the lease structure, I would like to have the restaurateurs be responsible to the upkeep and maintenance of this building to our department standards. So we do have facility maintenance staff and we do have park staff. However, I would require seasonal annual maintenance to be done in the building as per our requirements on behalf of the restaurateur. So ideally that will be stated within a lease, but the lease isn't developed yet. But I would not feel comfortable removing park staff from their current maintenance duties in favor of supporting building maintenance and grounds maintenance on the building. Hopefully that answers your question.
And just for clarification, this is intended to be year-round?
As of now, it's proposed to be around, yes. So the restaurateur, they've proposed kind of like a limited winter schedule right now. Until they start conducting business, I see some fluctuation within that schedule, but it would be up to their discretion. But it's anticipated to be an annually open building.
Okay,
So
thank you.
non-seasonal.
And the rendering has little fire pits kind of in the picture on the top left corner. So you can roast your marshmallows
Yep. And my first thought too, if you look on some of these renderings and McCray, I mean, I was here when the sandbar was here as well, both as a patron as well as a parks maintenance worker. So I know what the sandbar was. The deck was the most popular place to be at the sandbar, as well as providing some form of entertainment at the beach was also a priority too. So the thought process being here is there could be potential entertainment space, so via a live band or something else, some form of entertainment on kind of this expanded decking area on the exterior, and then potentially that overflow seating area in the interior. So we're thinking, potential live bands. I know a lot of bars and restaurants have trivia and everything like that too. So some area of the restaurant for entertainment.
All right, thank you. Anything else? If not, let's move to,
Did Mike have any comments about whether he
thank
liked
you,
it?
Mary. Mike?
Yes, I very much appreciate the update, and I think it seems to fulfill most of what the RLI was talking about, what our own concerns were, and I appreciated Tim's point about the birds. I think we would, or at least I would like to be kept appraised and involved with the parking and other processes as they come up. I realize that's going to be a while, but it would be important for us to be involved in that, or at least appraised.
Thank you, Mike. Item, or 8, new business item C, which is discussion decision on.
Mike.
Agenda item 8, new business, C, discussion decision on attendance absence notification process. And just a little background on this, what we're looking for to make sure we have quorums and such is that we have a way of knowing who is going to attend and if you're going to be a bit late or what's going to be our process that we are going to create, or do we even need a process for such? So that's sort of the bit of background. Anybody have comments?
I do, sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
We're talking with Misty, and she had a good point. I mean, it probably isn't the best thing to be advertising that one of us is not going to be in town for it. So whatever it is, I would think that it should be internal, perhaps the chairman and the vice chair be aware of it.
Are we okay? I know we're not supposed to send, reply all emails amongst ourselves, but just regarding simple attendance, whether I will not be able to make it to a meeting, I don't think there's any issues with that.
That would be exempt from that. That would be fine. So notifying of basically your attendance is fine. Okay. There's not a continued discussion with that. It's just a notification.
And I think another one of the reasons for this, when we were down members of the Parks Board, there was also an issue of whether or not we were going to have a quorum, and then whether or not we were canceling a meeting with enough notice and such, because people were that. So if we're comfortable with the amount of people that are here, and we'll just make sure that as part of our role is being here, unless we absolutely can't, and notifying as far in advance as possible, I think then a process like that is fine. I just know last time we had a little bit where people were running late or they were stuck in traffic and we didn't know if they were coming, and you're just like, well, we got to have some sort of process. So if we can even day of, maybe, but the farther in advance, like the month before, or doing that would be good.
I will say, especially since Mike is online tonight, if we are in this room, it's expected that we will have Zoom attendance availability as well.
We'll have what?
If we're in this room holding the meetings in council chambers, it's expected that we will have Zoom availability as well.
Zoom, thank you.
Which is great. That gives us an option. So like Mike can be here too. So, all right. So
I would have to say that the acoustics are excellent. I really can understand everything everybody's saying, probably better than when I'm there without my hearing aids.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike.
thank you.
So can I clarify then, our process is that if we are going to be late or not in attendance, we are going to notify both of you, because in case you're absent, then McCray will be chairing the meeting in advance.
Yeah.
So that you both know. Excellent.
Yeah. And then again, if you know for sure, like a vacation, traveling to Ireland or wherever, as soon as you know, we can put it in there so we can get an idea.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so then moving on to agenda item 8, new business D, and now we're at the discussions and recommendations on next steps. So we've heard some comments from our Jefferson County, and what we would like to do is continue that discussion to get some more specifics, I believe. Is that what we're looking for? So Colton or Patricia, maybe you can come back up to the podium, or both of you, so if we have a question, you can answer it. Just can hear.
May I make a quick
Yes,
comment?
Eric.
So in front of you, attached on the agenda as well, is the requested updating price estimates. So the OPCC that we had before, that's opinion of projected construction costs, was specifically for just the channel and the entirety of the mill pond. The attachment or document that you have in front of you is specifically for the previous 3 options that we discussed at the last meeting.
Okay.
So in this document, you'll see option 3, 4, and 5 listed, as well as the delineation of beneficial reuse versus landfill disposal costs. So hopefully this layout is a little bit easier to read. It also lists linear footage for both shoreline and the public shoreline itself. So I certainly hope this layout assists a bit. I did speak to Brandon Herbert, our Strand representing engineer, regarding the likelihood of beneficial reuse. He said that's very, very hard to calculate before removing any of the silts and sediments. So when you're talking about how much of this material could actually be reused rather than going to a landfill and having that associated cost, it's a very hard thing to calculate just because it's very specific to the types of material that are being removed, and the likelihood of someone in the area being able to use it is probably one of the largest aspects as well. But I did ask that he delineate the beneficial reuse costs versus the landfill disposal costs.
All right, thank you. And that's under D, the mill pond dredging options, OPCC 2024, and that'd be available online if people wanted to look at it specifically. All right, thank you. Any other comments before? I do have a couple questions.
I got a question for Eric. Do you anticipate, if we do move forward with dredging, that will you or city staff be filling out these permit applications, or will a consulting engineering firm be involved in the process?
Good question. So I did speak with private contractors just to kind of judge this cost as well, not just using inflation calculators. It can go both ways. It just depends on the associated cost for it. It is expected that I will be filling out the permits as of now. I do not have an issue with doing that. I would like kind of the general oversight of the permitting requirements. I don't necessarily want to micromanage, but I do not have an issue doing it, but it is a fairly sizable amount of staff time for it. However, with the supporting documents that we have, the existing dredging feasibility reports, the staff access that we have both at Jefferson County as well as the DNR, I wouldn't have an issue doing this. But it is an option to also have a private contractor complete these permit requirements as well. I'm just not sure what that associated cost would be. Okay. But it is a service that contractors provide as well to complete the permitting requirements.
My question is going to go to Colton and Patricia. So if you get again to the podium so they can hear the question and hear your answer, please.
And actually, before, since you were talking about a permit, I did want to tell you that Colton and I were talking to Erin Cox, who's the DNR Water Rig and Zoning, I forget her title, but she would be the person who would review the permit for dredging. I told her that, this was being considered in the city, and she said that if your group had any questions, she would be happy to come and answer any questions you might have.
And I think the city council did note one of the takeaways that I was given as a member of the committee here is that, and we do need to have environmental impacts for whatever our recommendations are for a final report. So we are going to, I think, a discussion further with both of you and with Aaron would be, I think, required or really helpful for us to close the loop on that request from the city council. sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, Mary. The question I have, Colton and Patricia, is that you said you're going to be doing a report about the inventory or such for the natives and invasives and such, and you made the comment about the within 3 feet of the shoreline, that is where a lot of the good natives are. I guess as far as your recommendations, is there like a desired amount, minimum amount? So let's say minimum, we want to get close to the shore is 3 feet. Ideally, we don't want to be closer than X feet. Is that something you are able to give us as far as information and recommendation?
So if I said 3 feet, I did not mean 3 feet. I think maybe 3 feet came up with depth of dredging, maybe. I am unprepared to say what a recommendation would be about how close to shore to get, as far away from shore as you could, in my mind, because again, that near shore area is so critical to fish and aquatic insects and turtles and amphibians that live in the water. Do you have anything to add?
I would just say you really just want that dredging channel kind of where the boats are going to be navigating more than anything, and you really want to kind of leave that kind of shoreline in area kind of not dredged or kind of left natural as much as possible. So, I mean, I wouldn't just say like you're just 3 feet or 6 feet off. You really want to just kind of go off of like where those piers are already at and where the people are hopefully trying to dock their boats and stuff, and just stay in that kind of general area. So it might be different for each pier, possibly.
Can I?
I guess I would also say, and I know this would be an expense, and so I'm hesitant to say it, but, you know, I know that people on the lake have fairly longer piers, especially on the city side. Some of them have to go out longer in order to get to the depth to moor their boat. So, you know, just because that's where their existing pier is, doesn't mean that their pier can't go out further.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Mary.
So I have a question regarding knowledge of alternatives. So there are a few things that I've been extremely concerned about coming in over the course of the last few months. And you kind of confirmed one of them today is the high risk of invasives spreading to the dredged areas. And I think, Colton, you had mentioned, even if we were to do the shoreline, the likelihood of that filling back in with plants is high. And I appreciate, given especially the ecosystem in the mill pond, that risk is higher than maybe other parts of the lake where you have more movement and other things going on. And so that's one concern. Secondly is the costs. I'm struggling with $1 million plus, I'm even getting close to 500 if we're doing a landfill disposal with just dredging the channel, knowing the population of citizens that actually are utilizing the area. So I went online and I said, what are alternatives to dredging? And I'm not an expert in this field, but I learned that you can do weed cutting, which would then allow you possibly to, and I don't know if there's pros, cons, and risks, I'm sure of all of this, but there's weed cutting, and it comes also with a cost, and that sounds like it comes with annual, and it comes with a whole bunch of other things. So I'm curious about weed cutting, and that would give navigability at some depth, but not maybe deep enough to ever get a pontoon back there, and I still don't know our vision long-term. I'm also struggling that we're doing like a short-term solution without having our long-term plan over the course of the next few years laid out. But I read about weed cutting. And the second thing I read about was something called hydro raking. And the hydro raking I thought was kind of interesting because at least it was, of course, it was a company that hydro rakes, so it's like an advertisement. So I'm not the expert, but I'm like, it gave it the impression it was less damaging, if you will, to the base of your water source with raking versus actual dredging, where you're actually moving the sediment or bottom material. And so I'm curious on, I'm trying to find other ways to get to similar means, possibly, that might be a consideration for the mill pond, and they may not be great solutions either, but I think if we don't try to come at it by solving it in different ways, we haven't done our due diligence. And so I'm curious if you know anything about raking, well, hydro raking or weed cutting, and whether they would serve a purpose for what we're trying to solve.
Yeah, so I'm not as familiar with the hydro raking, but definitely the weed harvesting. Yeah, that definitely is a possibility. You would do maintenance probably likely throughout the year if you're trying to keep like a certain area open and you're kind of cutting, it's kind of like cutting lawn. You're not obviously getting
down
the
to the
sediment
bottom.
or anything. You're just kind of cutting grass until it grows back up again. And I mean, there's some lakes where they're out there every week cutting some of the same areas. There's other lakes where they might do it only once a month or something. It kind of just depends on the area and how often it's growing back. With a lot of it being lily pads, I could see that you don't have to, but there could be other plants that come in as well when you're kind of opening up those areas too. So it would kind of be doing probably a trial run if you were going to go that route.
Yeah, like a
and
pilot.
Just kind of see, like a pilot, and just see kind of how it works out the first year and if you want to change anything moving forward, if you do go that route.
So I guess what I would add on to the harvesting is that it requires equipment, and
Yep.
there are smaller harvesters, like if you go to Lake Ripley or if you go to Lower Spring Lake, they're going to have fairly large plant harvesting machines. I know that there's companies that sell smaller ones that would be more appropriate for the size of the mill pond. One thing to know about that is you also need a permit from the DNR for harvesting. You can't just go in and harvest anywhere you want. You can harvest at a maximum, or the minimum depth you need for harvest is 3 feet of water. So you can't go into areas with less than 3 feet of water to harvest those plants. And that, I think, maybe is related to how important that near shore shallow areas are. And also, those weed harvesters are such that the cutting bars are set at a certain depth, and so if you go into shallower than 3 feet, you end up disturbing the sediment.
Yeah.
So that would act like dredging, and that's why the DNR doesn't allow that. And I guess, I don't know if you've been to see the mill pond recently. Colton and I actually went by today, and you can see that right now there's 2 citizens that have boats, motorboats on the water. And one of them, you can see that there is a path. And years ago on Lower Spring Lake, there was a property that was wanting the harvester to go to their area, but it was too shallow. And so at that time, the water resource manager at DNR said, well, if you use your boat enough, you're going to maintain a path. And you can see that at the mill pond where that 1 or 2 boats are going through pretty regularly, I think. And so if everybody did that, they would maintain a path. But of course, they need their pier to be to an area where they can actually moor their boat. I don't know what hydro raking is. I know that citizens on their own property, in front of their own property, are on other parts of the lake are allowed a certain distance that they can hand rake themselves to take out vegetation. But because the mill pond is a sensitive area designated by the DNR, they would, even to do that, would have to get a permit from the DNR. to do that raking. There was, more toward the Legion building, there was a property several years ago again who had a lot of cattails coming up and coming through their pier. And so they did contact the DNR to see if they could get a permit to cut that vegetation, and they were given the permit. So they were allowed to do it at that time, and I'm sure reasonable cutting would be allowed by the DNR.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for
Oh,
Colvin or Patricia?
I was just thinking about your question, and the other thing that came up also on Lower Spring Lake was that one property owner that the area was too shallow for a harvester. There was a company that wanted to come and harvest the water lilies, because then they could take them and resell them to people with ponds that are wanting water lilies, things like that. So again, the DNR did allow a permit for that company to go in and do that. So that's maybe another option, but I'm a little hesitant just because Rock Lake has zebra mussels, that a company might not want to go into a lake with zebra mussels, because then they could introduce them to another area. So I don't know if the DNR would allow that there.
And Patricia and Colton, just for geographic reference, where is Spring Lake?
Lower Spring Lake
Yes.
is in Palmyra.
Okay. Thank you.
Tim?
Yes,
I may?
Derek.
So I'm glad Mary brought up the potential alternative for weed cutting. Just so you're aware too, I would like to continue researching on my own. I have contacted a couple contractors who perform this. They perform dredging as well as weed harvesting. There's a couple other alternatives that they can do to it as far as what type of equipment they're using to do it. I'm just not at this point to have enough information to really form an opinion on the likelihood of moving forward with this, and I would like to include Aaron Cox in some of these discussions as well from the DNR, but I would like to continue my research on some of these alternatives. Hydro raking I've not heard of. I would like to conduct some of my own research on hydro raking, but I would like to continue the discussions with some of these contractors that I've contacted, as well as include Aaron Cox at this point to further pursue basically dredging alternatives, if you would like.
Thank you. Yes, Mary.
Can I have a question? Oh, sorry.
Yes, Mike.
I think, Mary, you'd spoken of the city council wanting to have an environmental impact statement to accompany our final recommendation, which we had, I think, planned on offering this month. Is that correct?
Might you repeat the question, Mike?
Oh, I know. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, I can hear you. I just I wasn't sure what you were asking about the environmental impact.
Well, if they're asking for an actual environmental impact statement, and maybe Eric and our Jefferson County folks can speak to this, I think that's a fairly significant undertaking. For us to produce that in the near future would be difficult, I think.
If I may speak, Mike, I mean, that would be just included within your resolution from City Council. That's not saying that you have to conduct it yourself, but you would rely on people like Jefferson County or Aaron Cox from the DNR to produce those materials with you, and you just include it in your recommendation to City Council once you form it.
Yeah, and our final report is what they're looking for, just to ensure
Yes.
that we don't have a gap and not bring forward the environmental impacts with what our final recommendation is.
But just so I'm clear, so that our final recommendation, which as I understood it, we were going to offer tonight or in time for the next city council meeting, I don't see us doing that then, or can we?
It doesn't have to be made tonight. Ultimately, it's up to the board's discretion to make a recommendation at this point. But it's not required by City Council to provide your final report to them by next meeting. It's not a requirement of that resolution. Just when you do form your final recommendation, it has to include environmental impact studies.
Okay, I understand that, but I thought we had decided at the last meeting, and perhaps I'm confused on this, that we were going to have basically a final vote tonight so that we could get it to the city council this month, but perhaps not.
You have the ability to do that, so we'll continue listing it as discussion recommendation, just so if you as a board would like to make a motion to form a recommendation, you can do that. But like I said, not a requirement of tonight's meeting.
Mike?
Is that correct, Tim?
That is my understanding. Mike, any other, are you okay with that?
I am. I guess I'm still just a little, not to be obtuse, but if the city council wants our final recommendation accompanied by an environmental impact statement, that time frame seems to me to be several months. I understand that's up to us when we submit it, but I just wanted to be clear. For instance, tonight, would we say, well, look, we think we should go with option 3, and here's why, but that really wouldn't be what they're looking for. They would want an environmental impact statement along with that, or no?
Yes, that
Okay.
was the
Well,
ask.
I think that rules out tonight then.
I think what we could do, if we get to that point tonight where we have narrowed it down to an option, we could, at that point, start drafting our recommendation. Even if we come up with our, as a board, what our recommendation is, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to finalize our actual recommendation, including all the environmental impacts and kind of like a pros and cons with our selected option. I don't think we're cornering ourselves into having to get that to city council this month, are we, Tim?
My understanding is that we are just to keep moving forward with this, gathering information, giving reports to the city council. It is my understanding that the city council they read our recommendations but didn't do a lot of in-depth conversation about it. And we want to do the right thing the right way. I think what we're looking for is we want to maximize the benefit as listed for the resolution, which is what's best for the citizens, what's best for the mill pond, as far as maintenance and preservation. And I think what Colton and Patricia have done is a great service to say, here's some things to consider. If this, then this. If we think it's best to narrow the channels, because that would maximize, or minimize impact, but still keep it good. I think those are all things we need to consider. So I think our answer is put it on the agenda for next time, asking for more detail as far as impact and ideas and such from both the DNR and from the Jefferson County staff, and then be able to make a recommendation. I also think, though, that we could say we are leaning towards this option and why.
Eric, are we already past next year's capital improvement plan?
No, we're not. We're not at that point. I think based on permitting requirements, by default, this would be a fiscal year 26 project. I did discuss with our contract engineer, actually this morning, the likelihood of submitting this for 2025, and we wouldn't submit it for 2025 budget if it wasn't guaranteed permitted that we could complete the work. So I think by default, we're leaning towards a 2026 capital project. So time crunch really wouldn't be specific for these fiscal year or the following fiscal year requests.
And I believe that was one of the things for Mike, why we were thinking tonight we wanted to come up with some sort of more definitive, is that so that Eric could make his proposal and we could move towards a budget. But if that is not a major issue right now, I think I would rather go to making more information so we're getting the best information to make the best decision for impact, maintenance, and use.
So like right now, I would have enough information to submit a capital request, but that's not the completion of the project really in the task from City Council. So I can pretty confidently say that we wouldn't have a time crunch on this to meet next year's fiscal year requests. I think by default, I'll omit it from 2025.
All right, so thank you very much. Any other questions, comments regarding agenda item D?
If I may, the last thing, like I said, I will continue my research on this. For next meeting, I will reach out to Erin at the DNR. I would like her to be available for questions, and I'll also invite the Zoom link as well, but I can speak with her following this meeting sometime this week and see if she would be willing to present, or not present, but be available for questions at the next Parks Board meeting if you would like.
I would think that'd be nice, and that's also, if we can add that back. to,
Mike.
Number 10, which is, thank you. We can put that in agenda item number 10, which is recommendation for future agendas. I think we should put that in there. I also will ask if we can have other people maybe kind of fine tune things or add details, or as maybe Mary or somebody can give us an assignment, research this hydro raking or the such, just so we have a little more information, and not from a .com, but from some other source.
And I'm gonna jump in, Mike, because I know that the intent was to make a decision tonight. I know you're not crazy. We did talk about that. I am very worried about the cost, to be very honest. The city council just approved a $1.7 million library, 1.7 million library
Renovation project.
Contribution, I should say,
Okay.
which is earmarked for 2025 or 2026. We have the Sandy Beach project, which is 1.5 million was the budget. It came in over 2 million. We have this project, and I think we have to say the only case we know we have to go in with is landfill disposal, because we got to go high. You can always, you get a benefit if you get a Benny, and you can go low, and you're talking 2.2 million, lowest 400,000 for the dredge. And so I really think we need alternatives and understand other costs and what the trade-offs are. And because I'm worried that it'll end up being nothing, because we can't afford it. We have so many big things, and then we have our new wastewater treatment plant. We don't understand that. Our properties are getting reassessed. I mean, our citizens are seeing a lot of dollars, and I'm worried. This has been great work. I am impressed with the amount of discussion that has transpired, but what I know today is when I saw these numbers come forward, this update, I had to pause and ask myself, how can you get to the same means in a different way? And for all I know, the raking or the cutting, and I learned something new, that the boats are going through and kind of carving their own mini dredge. And I had to go longer in my pier because the water level was too low. So the investment of the homeowner might have to be greater to get someplace where they can get out. I mean, there's all these varying factors, but I'm very worried that we may, if we had all the money in the world, want to do one of these more expensive ones, but I'm not sure that honestly, as a city, we can afford them. And so if we don't come up with, at least, I don't know if we can come up with alternatives. Maybe we're still gonna land with a dredge option, but if we don't really shake all of the other ways of trying to get a surface that's usable of some way, shape, and form, I don't think we've beat the options up enough. Because I can't imagine a 2.2 or 1.3 million, we're going to be able to afford it in 25 or 26, given all of these other things on the docket. And so that's the reality. And I have on my Parks Board hat and my City Council hat and my citizen hat. And I'm trying to say, where do we get the biggest bang for the buck? And I think the utilization in this space is so much smaller than the utilization of even the library, which I voted no on the library, because I feel like we have a nice library, and I know it'd be desirable to have a really, really nice library, which we may get. But I mean, it's a balance of all of these big ticket items. And so, and I'm again trying to represent the citizens, and where would they get the best use for all of their money? And these price tags, when they came up refreshed, really had me pause. And so that's why I'd like to learn more about other options. And so if we could get some more information on raking or hydro raking or weed cutting, and understood, are they high cost items, it's small, maybe the maintenance is too high, and the city say there's no way, we're doing it every week. or we're doing it every month. That might not even be feasible, but if, I just feel like we need to ask ourselves, why not, or could it be? And because I can't, again, I'm struggling with the price tags, honestly. And the repercussions of the dredging. When I hear about the invasives coming in as a high risk, that's solving one thing, but creating a bigger problem for the health of the mill pond. So Mike, yes, it was intended, I think, but I'm asking some of the questions I'm asking because I don't think I could vote for any of these right now because I don't like them, price tags and the consequences right now.
So thank you, Mary. Going to Mike's comment, and I think the spirit of the discussion and recommendations on the next steps, I think we can all agree it's not, no matter what, it's not going to get cheaper. You know, so it's, maybe part of our recommendation would be this, and realize you can extrapolate these out price-wise by what percentage, whatever that is, 8%, 10% down the road. Going back to Mary's comment, that if we can't afford it now, but at least now you have more detail as to what the costs are gonna be and what the impact is gonna be. So I think we want to still say, as a Parks Board, going to what's best for the citizens and maintenance and preservation of the mill pond, I think we would say vote on an option, and then subject to input from experts from the DNR, experts from the Jefferson Water stuff, to say, all right, if this, what are we looking at? And then trying to, again, lessen the impact, adverse impact, but no matter what decision we make, we're gonna, there's risk reward to that, you know. So I do, at least personally, I think we do want to kind of maybe vote so we can be working on something concrete. That's my thought.
Yeah, and I'll add, Mary, you bring up good points about the projects the city has going on in the next couple of years. Just because we give a recommendation doesn't mean city council needs to do this right away. Our recommendation could be budget for, at the city's discretion, when funds are available to do this work. As Mike said, it's not going to get cheaper. And my concern is if we continue the path of where we've been for 20 years of no improvements to the mill pond, at some point the sediment is just going to keep coming and it will become unusable and continue to become more expensive with more sediment to remove and inflation and other items or other factors that could increase the cost. So I guess my point was, we don't necessarily have to, the city council doesn't necessarily have to pick this work up right away. It could be planning, long-term planning for this project.
Any other comments, Mike?
I'm not clear which way we're going on this, but if we do, it would be interesting to me. Again, we had kind of picked the 50-foot channel, and I don't remember why, but if we can get by with half that size, that would make a big difference. But maybe that's the kind of adjustment. Are we saying that we could do as an addendum after voting on stuff?
So I can be the one to take the blame for the 50-foot channel.
Not the blame, I'm just wondering.
No, I just, when we were discussing those options, I just, for ease of calculation, utilized 50-foot because that's what was listed in the Strand report. As the folks from Jefferson County mentioned, 50-foot may not be necessary especially for the on the north side of the mill pond. I'm not a boat owner, so I don't really know how much space is really needed to get a boat in and out or to have multiple boats passing each other. And that said, I believe even the 50-foot channel that was listed from the Ferry Street Bridge to the boat launch, that could potentially be reduced in width as well, if that's more than enough space for boats to pass each other.
I would guess that the DNR has some guidelines on boat channels and safety buffers.
And I think that is something we could maybe get clarification on from our guest when she comes here. I do think, though, Mike, as to where we're going with this, is I do think we're pretty much trying to say, are we looking at option 4 or option 5? And then if we go to one of these and say this we want, knowing that we need to do more research onto the narrowness of the channel, you know, what access is there. But I think the thought that we put into our last meeting was, and I'm speaking just to my memory, option 4 was going to give access to everybody on the lake, and we could create a one-way path, a circle, and all that kind of stuff. But that would hopefully address both the fishing, the people access for paddle boards, the people on the lake without coming into any farther with their peers. It would alleviate any congestion, but still preserve as much as we could of the present mill pond, as you can see in the middle of the lack of a better term, the circuit. So at least for me, I think that's why we went with the option 4. The width of it is, again, that was a math thing. Yep. But if it's 15 feet or 13 feet, if that's what is going to work, I think we should go with either the minimum or just a little bit more than that. So, but again, I think we do want to say this is a recommendation we would say we need to work on, and then cost of it is, yes, might be too much for right now, but that's what we think would be best for the city. Any comments, yeah buts, rebuttals?
So were you just saying you're proposing option 4, or are you just using it as an example?
I'm using it as an example, but I personally, if we were to do forced choice, I would say that I would like to, as a Parks Board, we recommend that we look into and consider option 4.
So, on kind of that note, but in discussion about option 5, I guess I want one clarification from Patricia and Colton. You had mentioned that dredging along the public shoreline, that vegetation would soon return if we did dredge right up to the shoreline. And I guess one of the pros in my mind to option 5 was that it could promote additional availability for shoreline fishing. In your opinion, if we did dredge the public shoreline, and if that vegetation came back, would that not improve public shoreline fishing access?
So if you dredged along the city shoreline, likely Eurasian water milfoil would get in there and could be dense. And I know that in some lakes, there could be dense stands of milfoil, and when they do harvesting, they actually cut channels through those dense stands for fish passage, because it's hard for the larger fish to get through those dense stands. So you could negatively impact fishing success by dredging by the shoreline. I don't know if Colton had anything to add or. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then I guess I don't know if we want to just discuss option 4, if we want to keep going the route of eliminating.
Does everybody want to share what option they support? Why don't we just do what everyone would vote for today if we're voting, or just talk about our option of choice and why? Might be helpful.
Yes, because that's right. D is discussion and recommendation, so please share. Mary, you going to go?
Well, I think you know where I'm at. I would not support option 4 or option 5. I am even wondering if we need option 3 unless there's some benefit. Well, if we are agreeing that we get enough revenue from the launch, and I think we talked about multi-purpose ideas for the launch. If we got enough revenue from the launch and we are still wanting small boats, whatever volume, to get to the lake, then I think the city has some responsibility to keep a channel of some sort available, unless the motors themselves create a natural path, and dredging doesn't really buy us anything, and I don't know the answer to that. And I still feel it's worthy of finding other alternatives to get surface for pedal boarding or kayaking, since it's so dense back there, that doesn't create the increased invasive species problem. And I wasn't, and unfortunately, I have Patricia and Colton's materials from when you had the presentation months ago, but I didn't hear have the conversation at the time. But I think that risk is, even more tonight, is making me more and more uneasy with dredging. And I would be curious about harvesting or cutting or whatever the other technologies are. And it meant I would support option 3, again, provided it is an option that is to keep that open. I don't know if there's any dam, I don't know if there's any dam benefit, like silt or anything that for the dam, like the water has to go to the dam, if there's anything that's getting stuck in front of the dam. We haven't talked about that. Does this dredge to the car bridge, the boat launch to the car bridge, help with any dam movement or management? I think that would be interesting to note, because then that's another city responsibility, is to ensure that we have not created an issue by not maintaining, whatever maintaining means, the mill pond. So I can't right now support option 4 or 5, but personally, but I am curious about option 3 and alternatives to dredging, given the conversation tonight and the dollars. And the number of people, the citizens that I think are actually going to utilize whatever we do in there. I really, like I said, 10% of people own boats, even fewer own small boats. And if we do 4 or 5, I think we're assuming we're assuming we're pumping up South Ferry Drive. And I'm looking at reality of investments, and I'm not, like, maybe a few years out, but I'm thinking of all of the things in this beautiful park plan that are still, the comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, that are still like on the wish list. And I don't know that raising the road to get more boats back there is a enough population pull to make these dollar amounts worthy. So that's where I'm at.
I don't want to derail things. Can I ask another question to the folks from Jefferson County? If we were to harvest assuming most of what's there is native species via weed harvesting or some of the other options, is the risk for invasives coming in equivalent, less, more, compared to, I guess, a traditional dredging that we'd been considering?
It's a great question.
Well, so dredging, again, is permitted by the DNR, and there's 2 reasons that the DNR allows people to do harvesting. One is to control invasives like Eurasian water milfoil. So Lower Spring Lake, they have a lot of Eurasian milfoil, and a native coontail that's also in Rock Lake, but in Lower Spring Lake it has become a nuisance. So the second reason that the DNR lets people do harvesting is for navigation. And so they're allowed to cut natives if it's a navigational issue. So, you know, it's interesting just going and looking at the mill pond, because a lot of what you see with your eye without doing the survey with our rakes is whitewater lily. Yeah. And there's some spatterdock, which is the yellow lily that with oblong leaves. Those are both native. So it would be a good question to ask Aaron Cox. And I also the tubers of those plants are really thick. And so I don't know how a harvesting machine goes through those, so I don't know what the capabilities of those machines are for the whitewater lilies. I don't know if Colton knows. He used to work for a consulting firm that gave more input.
I would say you're not going to be harvesting like the tubers or anything. You're just harvesting the shoots from the tubers, and it will kind of grow back. I mean, you're obviously going to be opening up areas still, so you still have the potential for invasives, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's as likely for them to take over as if dredging, because you're just kind of removing those natives completely. Whereas the harvesting, you're kind of just cutting it down, but you still have the tubers and stuff in the sediment for them to grow back versus completely removing them pretty much, depending on how far down you're dredging. But I mean, there's always still going to be a potential for invasives to come in no matter what, so.
The other thing to point out about the plant survey that Colton is going to do, we go to every point with a rake, and we put the rake down on the ground, on the bed of the lake, and measure the depth of the water. So when he does that, you also will get, he can put together what we call a bathymetry map, which is like a topography map under the water. So you can see also if anything has changed since the last time we did that.
But Patricia, that's for the lake, right? Not for the mill pond?
That's for the mill pond. We're planning on actually being out there this Wednesday. So if you see some kayakers out there with big rakes, that's us doing the plant survey. And yeah, we'll be doing depths and stuff. And we have it from the 2 previous ones that have been done out there too. So you can kind of see like changes if there are any, so.
Yeah, I think that's something we should heavily consider is what the changes in, you will be getting sediment depth, correct? Or depth to sediment? Sorry.
Yeah, we'll be doing water depth, so pretty much from the surface down to the sediment of the pond. And typically we just go down to like the actual sediment, so we're not going down in the actual sediment to see like get hard bottom, but we're kind of just getting that. So you can probably somewhat see if there's like any sediment coming in. If it's like shallower, you'll know because it's kind of possibly filled in with some mucky sediment and stuff, so.
Okay. Yep. Yes, I think that's something we should heavily consider when those results are available, is what the comparison has been over the last few years of the depth to sediment. And so, you know, this year's a high water year, but last year was, I think, a much different story. The folks that I know who have property on the mill pond, and some of them did come and provide comments here. Last year, they were not able to get their watercraft out in the lake. This year, I believe they are able to with the high water levels, but I believe we're higher than normal this year.
Well, I live on Rock Lake, and I wasn't able to get my boat watercraft on last summer either. So Mill Pond and many riparian owners on Rock Lake and back in the, back where Chopel's is, we were all out early due to the drought. So it was common problem.
Could you refresh us on when the last topography mapping was done approximately of Mill Pond, please?
I believe there was a survey done in like 2020 and then 2022. So
Oh,
there
so
wasn't one done
previous.
last year, but the year before, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And if, just for recall, both the last times we've done the surveys, we still in what would be considered a drought year.
Was the question if like 22 was a drought year? and stuff?
Yeah, so when we surveyed the depth, it was, where I'm going at, the water flow probably isn't as big in 22 and 20 that it is now.
Yeah, and I can kind of compensate. We can look at what the water elevations are, like the days that we were out there, and kind of alter it kind of based off of that as well. So you can kind of see what those changes are based off of even the water level. So you kind of know if we're in a higher water elevation or lower based off of the water levels from the dam.
And then I would think that the water flow, if we are gonna have sediment moving and changing, that we're gonna see that this year from what it was in the last 2 surveys.
Yeah, and that's kind of my thought to do the survey, is to kind of see what the effects are from the dredging of the channel and stuff, and
And
see
then
if
we'll,
it's deepened it or anything.
and I know from one of the overhead, pictures of the sediment from the sand that was migrating in, we could also just tell where is the sand going now or not going now, because we've changed some of the size of the sand and such, but the water might be moving the sand also. So all that, I'm gonna assume is part of your survey.
Yeah, that's a potential. I mean, it's not as like specific, but you're getting at least a snapshot from, I think it's like 100-something points within the mill pond, and getting some data so you can at least somewhat understand what's happening.
Yeah, and I think that's what we all want. So thank you, Colton. Thank you, Patricia. Any other questions regarding that? All right, thank you for that. So still going back to discussions, and if we make a recommendation, then if someone has a recommendation, they can do the challenges to the recommendation. And they can do it with empirical knowledge, they can do it with opinion, they can do it with such. But I do think we do need to come up with some sort of recommendation that we're moving towards that can be refuted by the city council for all the reasons Mary's making, or some other things come up. But I do think it behooves us to make a recommendation to say, we want to do this and this is why we want to do it, and then get the rebuttals or get more information as we go forward. But right now, we're playing with we're working with 3 or 4 options, and I think we need to get it down to one that we can always change as we go along. So Anita, we haven't heard from you, and I don't think we've quite heard from Mike or McCray as to where they're leaning. We have heard from Mary, so thank you for that.
Well, I've been concerned about the possibility of invasives becoming more prevalent with dredging. You know, I've listened to a number of things, I've read some reports. That's been in the back of my mind ever since really I started reviewing documents. And then listening more and looking at the price tag. I know you guys don't want to hear this, but I really tend to agree with Mary. I would like to actually see if the DNR folks have had experience with, for instance, that hydro raking and what that experience has been, and also more about what their experiences have been with the harvesting in a similar situation, understanding that our mill pond is different, it's unique, it's got sensitive aspects to it that maybe some other ponds don't have. I'm not prepared to say, I mean, I guess if I had to say, if someone said, which one would you say is the lesser of the evils? I would say probably number 3, but I'm not prepared to endorse it with a vote right now. You know, and I was the one that said we need to move forward. So it probably sounds a little silly, but the more we consider all aspects, the more I just feel we need to see if there are some alternatives and find out what the cost of those alternatives would be, and if that would be an approach we might want to take for a year or 2 and see what kind of results. Plus, with that pending information that Cole and Patricia will have, I think that's important information for us to take a look at. So I'm on hold with really saying go forward with any of them right now.
All right, thank you, Anita. McCray?
If I was told I need to decide right now, both option 3 and option 4, I could support, leaning more towards option 4. With that said, I think those widths could be narrowed down. especially the portion that runs along the north side of the shoreline. My concern is with the other options is I feel like the mill pond right now is recreationally almost unusable. I walked past it just yesterday, and I don't think if I put my canoe in there, I could paddle anywhere besides the 10-foot open spot in the that runs from the Ferry Street Drive to the boat launch. And that reflects a lot of the public comment that we received was the mill pond is unusable, and it's a resource that we have that we should hopefully try to I guess the public comment was advocating for some form of improvement for increased recreation at the mill pond. I completely recognize that there are the natural resources there that I would prefer to maintain as much as possible, but we still, in the city council's resolution, we have to balance the natural resources and the needs of the community to preserve the mill pond for recreational usages. And I think right now we are not maintaining the mill pond's recreational uses, especially from the public comment we received about people used to jet ski on the mill pond. I'm not advocating for that, but I think the mill pond is not being utilized recreationally to an extent that it could be, with some improvements.
Thank you. Great. And Mike?
I've changed, and I'm kind of with Anita on this. I kind of came in thinking, all right, I'll probably go with 4, but I hadn't really thought or realized that we would be possibly diminishing shoreline fishing by dredging nearby, or the high probability of perhaps impassable Euro-Asian milfoil growth. So I have a difficult time right now casting a vote. And I understand great points by McCrae about how the citizens want to use it, and I get that, but sometimes nature doesn't let us use things perhaps the way we want. So right now, if you said, Mike, there's a gun at your head, you vote for one of the 3, I would probably go with number 3, because I just don't see what I'm getting with the other 2. If, in fact, I don't get shoreline fishing, if I get increased Eurasian milfoil growth, I just don't see that working.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
And the cost.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the cost is going to be a matter of all these issues, and the cost is something we want to be very cognizant of. So what I'm hearing right now are either abstaining, or if forced choice, they would go option 3 and get more information. Right now I'm hearing McCrae would have us pursue option number 4 with more detail as to the width of the dredge to protect against invasions of invasives.
I wouldn't necessarily more detail. I would say we could reduce those widths of the channels to decrease costs and the potential for invasives.
All right, so thank you for that. And I'll put a bit of a wrench in this too, is that given what we've heard and the concerns of dredging and invasives and not having the most recent depth analyzations and other information that's going to come from the survey, I am now leaning to a morphed option 3 with the access from the lake to the launch, with possibly only dredging in an appropriate width and distance from the shoreline, maybe the west shore, so that we could have information to say, what is the impact, even if it was the south part of the West Shore, to see if we dredge that, whatever distance away, but where people could, and we could use that as sort of our experiment to see what would happen without having a lot of impact. That would be public access. So I guess I would say at this point, I can agree with others, just in the air of caution, go with recommending 3 with the addition of finding out if we can do a west dredging, but again, keeping it narrow and keeping it away from the shoreline so we weren't disturbing anything at that point. So
I would ask, is it generally agreed upon to still pursue alternatives like weed cutting, get further information? Is that fairly collaborative?
I think that's a good idea. I am very curious when the findings are available from the most recent raking.
Okay.
I could support something like what Tim just mentioned, but if there's evidence that the level of sediment in the mill pond is increasing, then I would reconsider and maybe pursue a recommendation for a more, I guess, invasive dredging option.
So at least kind of using my resources here from my understanding, we'll wait on the survey results from Jefferson County. And at this time, pursue alternatives to dredging. Is that accurate?
I believe that would be an accurate statement. Do we have Mike, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I just can't see voting tonight when we're 2 weeks away from all this new information.
McCray, would you agree with that? Mary
Yes.
and Anita? All right, so what I'm hearing as far as the recommendation is that we will defer any vote. We will note that the majority is going to option 3 at this point, or nothing. And we will get information going forward from the survey that Jefferson County will do. We will get information from the DNR for permitting. We will get information from Eric regarding some of the other options and feasibility and costs and such. And I would say at the August meeting, we will collate those here, collate them, and then decide. But more likely, I don't think we'll even be voting at the August meeting then.
Could I propose something so we are making progress today? I don't think anyone, sorry, I didn't mean that negatively, but it doesn't sound like anyone's looking at option 5. Could we eliminate option 5 from consideration if?
I think that's a great idea. I think that we all have been worried about just the shoreline, public shoreline only, especially given some invasive species. So I think that's a great recommendation.
Would that be a motion?
Motion.
So am I hearing a motion to officially vote to eliminate option number 5, which is the 50-foot channel and the public-owned shoreline?
Correct, I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second to that motion, to eliminating option 5?
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion to eliminate option 5. Do we have a vote? We'll start with you, McCray.
Aye.
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 Mike?
Aye.
And I'll go along and I'll say aye. So it is official that we are eliminating from the option moving forward, option number 5. Okay, thank you. So any other discussions regarding option or new business regarding the mill pond recommendations and
Yes.
such? Yes, Mary?
Yes, I still am really, would like us to be thinking innovatively and creatively about if we have, I'm looking at if we have in the lottery in Lake Mills, and we have 2.2 million or a million, or even 500,000, And we have the mill pond. Are there other aspects of the mill pond that would be adding enjoyment and fulfillment that is looked in a different way than what we've been thinking about? Like I had mentioned, could you do a boardwalk from Sandy Beach to the downtown area? Now, I don't know, maybe that's not a great idea, but it would, you could walk then you could moor your boat on the beach and you can walk uptown on the boardwalk. And that's in lieu of raising South Ferry and getting big boats back there, but it's a different way to get to the same means. And it doesn't, then, so it's not through navigability, but it's through walking. Or is it a multi-use path and you could bike it? Or is there some other creative things that we could be thinking about regarding the mill pond? That isn't, I know we started at dredging, and I know that, the big picture, because McCray, you're right about the words on the public saying the mill pond's unusable. And it is Mother Nature, and so maybe it's not usable the way it used to be used, but is there a new way of using it? I don't know what that could be. And is it worth us to keep chewing on that to make it a part of a vision for the mill pond that could be staged over a period of years if it costs a lot of money, or at least food for thought for reinventing the mill pond's beauty in a different way? I don't know, and maybe that's what your role is actually, Eric, and that's, as the lead over parks, to be innovating this kind of thing. But because I don't want to give up on it. And I feel like option 3 is a little bit of like, giving up on it a tad, but maybe something else.
If you're willing, Mary, and if others agree to this, I would propose that, and what I'm hearing is that you're basically saying, let's negate this resolution and rethink the whole thing, is what I'm hearing.
No, not necessarily. I don't think we should negate it. Because I think this is still, there's still, I think, benefit in thinking about the options that we're discussing today, because it's navigability with the boats the way we've been thinking about them. But I think we really should be thinking differently also around, is there something, if we're going to spend the money, is this how we would want to spend it to benefit the mill pond? And, I don't know, I'm just always trying to think about how, I always think about when you're a homeowner and you think you have $10,000 to spend, what are you going to do? A new landscaping plan? So you're going to add on a new porch, or are you going to go buy yourself a kayak? Or I don't know, you think about what you're doing. I think there's a little bit of, we've got big dollar amounts, and I am not afraid to go asking for them, but is there something else that we can be innovating around that would bring more exposure to the mill pond, or would be a way to use the mill pond in a way that we're not thinking about, because we started with dredging, and I understand why we started with dredging, because Strand started there, and our citizens were looking for access out, that are owners on the mill pond, and we see all the lily pads, and we're worried about it, filling in. So I understand where we started, and it still may be the right solution. But I know I always think out loud a little bit on, is there something else that's innovative and creative that would bring people to the mill pond in a different way that we haven't considered? And it may mean you have to dredge and do something else, or you have to do or you have to rake and then add a new pier or something. I don't know. That could be a combination of these things. So it's just a thought, and I think that's like more of a brainstorming that we all kind of just go back and, I don't know, citizens have ideas about other ways to innovate and reinvent, and that would be a future agenda item.
So we can.
But you all might not agree with that. You may think that's out of scope. But Mike's laughing.
What's that, Mike?
Or Eric might think it's out of scope.
It's interesting.
So for lack of a better term, because I think what you're adding potentially is another option to consider, other uses of the thing with either no dredging or some sort of modified dredging. So what are we going to call it? Mary's Mix, or what are we?
No. I mean, it's just, I don't know. And some of it comes with, if you could rake, would you, I don't know, I'm just trying to think, if you could rake and get a lot of the tops of the lily pads off, it becomes a beautiful landscape for kayaking as an example, and we talked about, could you do a kayak launch? You did that, you talked about the ADA one that's in Marshall, and so that's intriguing to me. And I drive by Bartles Beach a lot, because I live down the street, and there's people getting their kayaks off on that narrow curve, and it's very dangerous. And boy, wouldn't it be lovely to have a beautiful kayak launching location with parking in lieu of, or in addition to maybe the small boat launch. But that's a different vision than getting big boats and mooring them and water skiing. It's just a different play on the water. But that would mean I'd add, you'd maybe still dredge the channel or do something to the channel, and then you'd have to cut, and then you'd have to, just a different package of ways to invest your money, which may end up being just as much money here, but it might bring in more citizens, bring in people who don't have a boat, or who have a boat that's more affordable, like a kayak, or you can rent a kayak now and rent them on a few places. So that's all I'm asking is, should we be thinking of ways and then also balancing to make sure the ecosystem is healthy? So it's just an idea.
Yeah, well, you're part of the city council. I think it's very valid to bring it up and looking at costs and opportunity and getting at the fulfilling, the maintenance and preservation and recreation of the mill pond. I guess what I'm hearing is that we're gonna have to add that to an agenda item. And a lot of it will be based on what we hear from the survey as to the depths and what's changing there. And what Eric's gonna have for options. So it sounds like we're gonna have information coming at the next meeting that will help us come up with another set of potential recommendations moving forward in, I guess it would be then September. So, I mean, is that kind of what I'm hearing, is that right now what we've agreed to is we've eliminated option 5. We've already eliminated option 2, which is dredging the entire surface area. So we're at looking at options 3, 4 with more input from the Wisconsin DNR and more input from the Jefferson County, plus information that Eric's going to bring and any other information we would gather when it comes to use of the mill pond, be it kayaking. But I know this is the times I've been on the mill pond, and with a kayak or a canoe or a boat, there's certain parts of it you can't get through. And I think there's probably some damage to that too when you're going someplace and then you got to try to get the thing off the sediment or something. So I think the more we can kind of delineate a path or delineate use areas so people are able to use it well, I think that's what the city would want. But again, that's one person's data point. Any other comments to this? As to someone have a resolution or an idea, a recommendation, a proposal for all the things that we just heard discussed? What is our recommendation going to our August agenda, I guess is what I'm looking for.
Would it be fine to move through the agenda then, and this would be the next agenda topic item for future agendas, or, because we still have one other agenda item to discuss?
Yeah, I think that's wise. Would everybody agree with that? We can move to, right now we have,
Parks Board meeting?
well, yeah, we have a discussion on the August Parks Board meeting. I'm on 8E. This was news to me. Is there a reason we need to move it to August 26th?
Yep. So I can provide some input. So Madison notified me that it is actually, per state statutes, we cannot hold a public meeting within 24 hours of voting. Voting would be the next day after our next regularly scheduled Parks Board meeting. So if this were to be on the first Monday of the month in August, it would conflict with those state statutes for voting in the same building. So it is more of a, by default, this would have to be canceled as per state statutes. I suggested August 26th because it's the next available Monday that this room is available. Mondays do work well with my schedule. And it was just kind of the proposed day for it. And I just look at the council chambers room by default for availability. I would like to move forward with using this room. And August 26th is just the next available, easiest option to hold a Parks Board meeting in August. So, sorry for bringing it up, but I did want you guys to vote. So instead of just saying, hey, next August meeting is canceled, let's pick a replacement date immediately was kind of my thought, just so I can get it on the calendar. It was also news to me that we cannot hold a public meeting 24 hours within voting, so I learned something as well.
So that date will not work for me, August 26th.
Zoom availability or no? Okay.
We're going to be fishing out of Montana.
We could go there.
Yeah, can I come with Mike?
Zoom
That
from
sounds
there.
great. And like I said, it does not have to be August 26th. If you vote no on August 26th, all this does is I will look for a replacement date. It may just not be in this venue or in this room, but I'll work with Tim and the rest of you guys to pick a replacement date. It was just kind of my recommended date.
Can we discuss now when we're all available and
Yeah,
try to schedule?
absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Are Mondays, is this room open most Mondays or?
Not by default, no.
Okay.
So if you guys, what I would suggest then is don't pick, my suggestion, obviously can't pick a date tonight, but let me provide a list of dates where this room is available to you first, and then pick out of those preferred dates if that works. Does that work for all of you?
And we're
Now,
all-
we can hold the meetings in a separate room, like the community center downstairs or something. I would just kind of like to make it somewhat standard practice to use this room if possible. So I think let me start there. August 26th was the next available Monday for this room. Mondays are normally the most available for it, but let me get a couple replacement dates for you and we'll go from there. But that's why, by default, the first Monday will not be able to be held.
But we were scheduled for the second Monday. The 12th was the second Monday. Isn't that the 12th we have it on?
I believe there's
But the voting is on the 13th.
Oh, yep, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Instead of
you're-
the first Monday, I
yeah,
misspoke then.
second.
Yep, there was a conflict with our normally scheduled one, so. But I will get back to you with a list of available dates for this room. If there is not an available date that works for everybody, we will hold the meeting in a different venue. So different room within the building, but let's start there. And for open meeting records purposes, discussing meeting availability will not be an issue.
Well, the other thing I would think we'd want to make sure whatever we discuss or throw out there as options works for Jefferson County and works for the
Yes.
DNR.
Yep.
And then we
So-
also run into the issue of, are we going to be so close to our September meeting that we won't really be able to have any information in between meetings, so.
Let me work with Madison then throughout this week. By the end of this week, I can shoot you a list of a couple potential dates, and we can just discuss on a poll. I may not have Aaron Cox's DNR, or from the DNR availability at that point, but at least we can get moving forward to selecting a date so I can work with her on it. So hopefully by the end of this week, I'll have a list of available times and dates for you all.
Does that work for, Mike, does that work for you?
Sure. And, the other thing is, we just need a quorum. We don't have to all be here.
Correct.
Correct, yep.
And does the proposal that Eric just gave work for you? Yeah. Okay. And Anita? Mary? All right, so thank you, yeah, so I think,
Yeah, thanks.
again, just clarity though, we're gonna still try on a Monday, Wednesday by default, or just,
Yeah, the first pick would be a Monday, just because like I said, it has the least conflicts for this room. The next closest availability, I think, would be Wednesdays.
again, because we're talking, we want to be
We're
in
talking
this
this,
chamber.
yeah. So my priority, I will try my best to get some selected dates and times for this room, especially if we are having Erin. Maybe she cannot attend in person, but maybe she could attend via Zoom, which we would have that availability too. So let me do some research. August 26th, which is the next available Monday.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
By default, I'll omit the 26th and look for other dates.
All right, thank you. All right, so We are moving to agenda item number 9, announcements. Any announcements? McCray says he's not going to be he's going to be someplace exotic. Mike's going to be someplace exotic. Any other announcements? Hearing none. That agenda item is over. Recommendations for future agendas. Now, we can come up with him, but also, or come up with them now. We've already had a few. And Mike, do you have those noted in the notes as to items for the agenda?
Probably not. I will be reviewing the video, which is what I do, but I think what we've got is a discussion of the city council resolution. We're talking about the philosophy and what the board wants out of minutes for the meeting. Those are the two that I have, I think.
Okay, those are good. Eric has others.
I would say, at least from my understanding too, it would be a continued discussion of the Mill Pond resolution.
Right.
I don't
Right.
believe that we would have a presentation from Erin, but I would like her to be available for questions from Parks Board is kind of my thought. So I'd like her in attendance. I would like to make that a portion of that agenda item, say with input from Erin Cox from the DNR. I would like to add that as an agenda. The next one, I would say I can provide you, and again, an updated restaurant concept. At that time, City Council, I assume, will have issued their response or issued a vote at that point, and I can keep you updated what that concept and design and steps moving forward are. Other than that, I don't have any needs for Parks Board at this time.
The other agenda item would be Colton's findings.
Yes.
Would you like to be considered a presenter, Colton? Can I ask that question? Is that fair to ask that now? So instead of being a specific agenda item, we will have you as a guest presenter. So it'll be listed as like Colton Hutchison and Jefferson County presenting findings of Mill Pond Survey 2024.
Yeah, that would be fine.
So I'll add him as a guest or presenter section.
Any other agenda items? Again, what we'll do is we'll do the standard agenda, then we'll add the ones that we just noted. Any other recommendations for future agendas? All right, if hearing none, I would again thank McCray for agreeing to be vice chair, Mike for being secretary, and Mary and Anita, everybody for bringing your comments. And again, I'm wonderful of the free to disagree, but also you're wise, which is wonderful. So I would say at 8:10, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
And thank you.